Good evening. I'm Mr. Mark 60, and we continue with our series on racism, white supremacy, what it is, how it works. And we remind you to remember that if you do not understand racism, white supremacy, what it is and how it works, everything you understand will only confuse you. Today I introduce to some and relive for others Mr. Willie Lynch and the making of a slave. Listen carefully. I greet you here on the banks of the Jordan River in the year of our Lord 1712. First, I shall thank you, the gentlemen of the colony of Virginia, for bringing me here. I am here to help you solve some of your problems with slaves. Your invitation reached me on my modest plantation in the West Indies, where I have experimented with some of the newest and still the oldest methods for control of slaves. Ancient Rome would envy us if my program is implemented. As our boat sailed south on the James River, named for our illustrious king, whose version of the Bible we cherish, I saw enough to know that your problem is not unique. While Rome used cords of wood as crosses for standing human bodies along its highways in great numbers, you are here using the tree and the rope on occasions. I caught the whiff of a dead slave hanging from a tree a couple miles back. You are not only losing valuable stock by hangings, you are having uprisings. Slaves are running away. Your crops are sometimes left in the fields too long for maximum profit. You suffer occasional fires. Your animals are killed. Gentlemen, you know what your problems are. I do not need to elaborate. I am not here to enunciate your problems. I am here to introduce you to a method of solving them. In my bag here, I have a foolproof method for controlling your black slaves. I guarantee every one of you that if installed correctly, it will control the slaves for at least 300 years. My method is simple. Any member of your family or your overseer can use it. I have outlined a number of differences among the slaves and make the differences bigger. I use fear, distrust, and envy for control. These methods have worked on my modest plantation in the West Indies, and it will work throughout the South. Take this simple little list of differences and think about them. On top of my list is age, but it's there only because it starts with an A. The second is color or shade. There is intelligence, size, sex, size of plantations, and status on plantations, attitude of owners, whether the slaves live in the valley, on a hill, east, west, north, south, have fine hair, coarse hair, or is tall or short. Now that you have a list of differences, I shall give you an outline of action. But before that, I shall assure you that distrust is stronger than trust, and envy stronger than adulation, respect, or admiration. The black slaves, after receiving this indoctrination, shall carry on and will become self-refueling and self-generating for hundreds of years, maybe thousands. Don't forget, you must pitch the old black male versus the young black male, and the young black male against the old black male. You must use the dark-skinned slaves versus the light-skinned slaves, and the light-skinned slaves versus the dark-skinned slaves. You must use the female versus the male, and the male versus the female. You must also have your white servants and overseers distrust all blacks. It is necessary that your slaves trust and depend on us. They must love, respect, and trust only us. Gentlemen, these kits are your keys to control. Use them. Have your wives and children use them. Never miss an opportunity. If used intensely for 1 year, the slaves themselves will remain perpetually distrustful of each other. Thank you, gentlemen. That was the beginning of the making of a slave, as told by someone, not sure, real or imagined, by the name of Willie Lynch. You may or may not have heard of the Willie Lynch Syndrome. What I have just read to you is a condition and a psychological effect as perpetrated by chattel slavery on the minds of the slave. Whoever this gentleman was, real or imagined, came up with the perfect strategy for what we see among our people today. It's worked beautifully. He said 300 years in the year 1712. 300 years from that point was 2012. Well, we're now in 2021, and it looks to me like much of this so-called Willie Lynch syndrome is alive and well in our people. Again, when you search for whether this man is real, well, you come up empty-handed. No one to this day has been able to actually find this person. But the concept and the ideas live on. Let me read a little bit more in the section of the book called Let's Make a Slave. It was the interest and business of slaveholders to study human nature, and the slave nature in particular, with a view to practical results. I, and many of them, attained astonishing proficiency in this direction. They had to deal not with earth, wood, and stone, but with men, and by every regard they had for their own safety and prosperity, they needed to know the material on which they were to work. Conscious of the injustice and wrong they were every hour perpetuating, and knowing what they themselves would do. Conscious of the injustice and wrong they were every hour perpetuating, and knowing what they themselves would do. Were they, these white slave owners, the victims of such wrongs? They were constantly looking for the first signs of the dreaded retribution. They watched, therefore, with skilled and practiced eyes, and learned to read with great accuracy the state of mind and heart of the slave. These white supremacists watched us very, very carefully. Through his sable face, unusual sobriety, apparent abstractions, sullenness and indifference, indeed, any mood out of the common was afforded ground for suspicion and inquiry. Let us make a slave. What do we need? First of all, we need a black nigger man, a pregnant nigger woman, and her baby nigger boy. Second, we will use the same basic principle that we use in breaking a horse, combined with some more sustaining factors. What we do with horses is that we break them from one form of life to another. That is, we reduce them from their natural state in nature. Whereas nature provides them with the natural capacity to take care of their offspring, we break that natural string of independence from them and thereby create a dependency status so that we may be able to get from them useful production for our business and pleasure. Next, the cardinal principles of making a Negro. For fear that our future generations may not understand the principles of breaking both of the beasts together, the nigger and the horse, we understand that short-range planning, economics results in periodic economic chaos. So that to avoid turmoil in the economy, it requires us to have breadth and depth in long-range comprehensive planning, articulating both skill and sharp perceptions. We lay down the following principles for long-range comprehensive economic planning. Both horse and niggers is no good to the economy in the wild or natural state. Both must be broken and tied together for orderly production. For orderly future, special and particular attention must be paid to the female and the youngest offspring. Both must be crossbred to produce a variety and division of labor. Both must be taught to respond to a peculiar new language. Psychological and physical instruction of containment must be created for both. We hold the 6 cardinal principles as truth to be self-evident, based upon the following discourse concerning the economics of breaking and tying the horse and the nigger together, all inclusive of the 6 principles laid down above. Note, neither principles alone will suffice for good economics. All principles must be employed for orderly good of the nation. Accordingly, both a wild horse and a wild or nature nigger is dangerous even if captured, for they will have the tendency to seek their customary freedom, and in doing so might kill you in your sleep. You cannot rest, and in so doing might kill you. That is to say, they sleep while you are awake and are awake while you are asleep. They are dangerous near the family house, and it requires too much labor to watch them away from the house. Above all, you cannot get them to work in this natural state. Hence, both the horse and the nigger must be broken. That is, breaking them from one form of mental life to another. Keep the body, take the mind. In other words, break the will to resist. Now, the breaking process is the same for both the horse and the nigger, only slightly varying in degrees. But as we said before, there is an art in long-range economic planning. You must keep your eye and thoughts on the female and the offspring of the horse and the nigger. A brief discourse in offspring development will shed light on the key to sound economic principles. Pay little attention to the generation of original breaking, but concentrate on future generations. Therefore, if you break the female mother, she will break the offspring in its early years of development, and when the offspring is old enough to work, she will deliver it up to you. For her normal female productive or protective tendencies will have been lost in the original breaking process. For example, take the case of the wild stud horse. A female horse and an already infant horse, and compare the breaking process with two captured nigger males in their natural state. A pregnant nigger woman with her infant offspring. Take the stud horse, break him for limited containment. Completely break the female horse until she becomes very gentle, whereas you or anybody can ride her in her comfort. Breed the mare and the stud until you have the desired offspring. Then you can turn the stud to freedom until you need him again. Train the female horse, whereby she will eat out of your hand, and she will in turn train the infant horse to eat out of your hand also. When it comes to breaking the uncivilized nigger, use the same process, but vary the degree and step up the pressure so as to do a complete reversal of the mind. Take the meanest and most restless nigger, strip him of his clothes in front of the remaining male niggers, the female and the nigger infant, tar and feather him, tie each leg to a different horse faced in opposite directions, set him afire and beat both horses to pull them apart in front of the remaining niggers. The next step is to take a bullwhip and beat the remaining nigger male to the point of death in front of the female and the infant. Don't kill him, but put the fear of God in him, for he can be useful for future breeding. Now, the breaking process of the African woman. Take the female and run a series of tests on her to see if she will submit to your desires willingly. Test her in every way, because she is the most important factor for good economics. If she shows any sign of resistance in submitting completely to your will, do not hesitate to use the bullwhip on her to extract that last bit of resistance out of her. Take care not to kill her, for in doing so, you spoil good economics. When in complete submission, she will train her offspring in the early years to submit to labor when they become of age. Understanding is the best thing. Therefore, we shall go deeper into this area of the subject matter concerning that what we have produced here in this breaking process of the female nigger. We have reversed the relationship in her natural uncivilized state. She would have a strong dependency on the uncivilized nigger male, and she would have a limited protective tendency toward her independent male offspring and would raise male offsprings to be dependent like her. Nature had provided for this type of balance. We reversed nature by burning and pulling a civilized nigger apart and bullwhipping the other to the point of death, all in her presence. By her being left alone, unprotected, with the male image destroyed, the ordeal caused her to move from her psychological dependent state to a frozen independent state. Listen carefully, because this relates to why male and female black relationships are in the state that they're in. It is still that way, looking at this psychological devastation from the beginning. Let's continue. By her being left alone, unprotected, with the male image destroyed, the ordeal caused her to move from her psychological dependent state to a frozen independent state. You don't have to look around any further and ask why black women and black men have trouble getting along with one another. You can very easily trace it back to this genetic spread. There is something about the spreading throughout our genes of this effect that to this day our relationships are dysfunctional. Let's keep going. In this frozen psychological state of independence, she will raise her male and female offspring in reversed roles. When we look at the creation of the welfare state, we are looking at another version of this frozen psychological state of independence. Why? Because they paid black women to have children while they kept the male out of the house. This was another way to destroy what would have been an intact black family. The introduction of the welfare state did more damage to the black family than any of this nonsense on these plantations. Let's continue. For fear of the young male's life, she will psychologically train him to be mentally weak and dependent, but physically strong. Because she has become psychologically independent, she will train her female offsprings to be psychologically independent. Catch it? What you have got, or what have you got? You've got the nigger woman out front and the nigger male behind and scared. You understand what's happening here in 2021? You understand when we talk about racism, white supremacy being structured and maintained for the genetic survival of the white race? You understand why they had to do this? And why to this day the effects still remain? And you think that you can let this system crawl along without your total awareness of the war that we are in? Wake up. We can't afford to sleep because this is real talk right here. This is real serious planning. Nobody goes through this kind of planning for a short period of time. This was done for perpetuity. I'm going to say it again. What have you got? You've got the nigger woman out front and the nigger man behind and scared. This is a perfect situation of sound sleep. Sound sleep and economics. Before the breaking process, we had to be alert and on guard at all times. Apparently now, they don't have to be. This thing is self-perpetuating now. Racism, white supremacy is a structure, but the racists themselves don't have to lay a finger on us. We'll do it for him. And we're doing it. Every time you see one of us kill another one of us, we're doing it for him. Don't tell me I'm blaming the victim. I'm saying stop killing one another. I don't want to hear that shit. We don't need to do his work for him. I don't care what the structure is doing. We can counter the racism with right thinking, right speech, right and correct action. That's why I'm teaching you where it began, how it began, and what it's doing since then, and how we counter it. And no, marching is not the answer. Right thinking, codification is the answer. That's what we're going to deal with. That's what we're going to do. Let's keep going. He says, now we can sleep soundly, for out of frozen fear his woman stands guard for us. I'm going to comment again. Look at how black women are promoted in the society and black men to a greater or lesser degree or not. Look at the jobs that black women get, even though both the male and the female have the same credentials. Who gets the best positions in the system of racism, white supremacy? The woman. She is less threatening. She's less of a threat. And so what he does is he pits them against us. He pits us against one another. He gives a few trinkets to her and denies me the same kinds of trinkets. I'm just saying, let's just understand what it is. Okay? We're not going to trip. We're just going to counter it with wise thinking, action, knowledge, and the right perspective. We're going to start getting tactical. We're going to start becoming strategic. And we're going to stop certain destructive, self-destructive behaviors. This is what this video, this channel, is all about. Let's keep going. He says, now we can sleep soundly, for out of frozen fear his woman stands guard for us. He cannot get past her early slave molding process. He is a good tool, now ready to be tied to the horse at a tender age. By the time a nigger boy reaches the age of 16, he is soundly broken in and ready for a long life of sound and efficient work and the reproduction of a unit of good labor force. Look at this. Don't miss this. We ain't talking about yesterday, we're talking about now. This kind of psychological devastation is in effect now. Continually through the breaking of uncivilized savage nigger by throwing the nigger female savage into a frozen psychological state of independence, by killing of the productive male image, and by creating a submissive, dependent mind of the nigger male slave, we have created an orbiting cycle that turns on its own axis forever, unless a phenomenon occurs and reshifts the position of the male and female slaves. That's the counter-racist code that we're going to be bringing into reality as we learn how to do this. That's counter-racist code that he's very worried about and that we are now up on. We're now going to be implementing. Let's keep going. He says, unless a phenomenon occurs and reshifts the position of the male and female slaves. He says, we show what we mean by example. Take the case of the two economic slave units and examine them closely. So here he wants to go into how he and his other slave masters are going to psychologically and socially affect what they call the nigger marriage. Watch this. We breed two nigger males with two nigger females. Then we take the nigger males away from them and keep them moving and working. Say one nigger female bears a nigger female and the other bears a nigger male. Both nigger females being without influence of the nigger male image, frozen with an independent psychology, will raise their offspring into reverse positions. This is why it's very important that the male or the black male father be in the home. Nobody's saying that a woman can't raise a child, but a woman can't raise a man. Period. I just demonstrated that for you because it was intended that she couldn't, that she wouldn't, that she can't. She's been psychologically damaged, reversed. The children are reversed. The boys become bitchy. The girls become distant and unable to formulate healthy male-female relationships because of this. He says the one with the female offspring will teach her to be like herself, independent and negotiable. We negotiate with her, through her, by her. We negotiate her at will. The one with the nigger male offspring, she being frozen with a subconscious fear for his life, will raise him to be mentally dependent and weak. But physically strong. In other words, body over mind. You see now why we have to work on our minds? You see why we have to change our minds? You see why we have to have coded mentality? Now, in a few years, when these two offsprings become fertile for early reproduction, we will mate and breed them and continue the cycle. That's good, sound, and long-range comprehensive planning. I'm Mr. Mark 60. We stop here and pick up in part 2 when we talk about warning, possible interloping negatives. I'll be back. to explain next time on the subject of racism, white supremacy, what it is, and how it works. Like the page, subscribe, tune in next time. Take care. Peace.